All right, so I've changed my mind about the nerve endings. I kind of already went through why we have nerve endings, why they're important and all of that. Now let's talk about the different types of nerve endings that we have. So we actually have quite a few nerve endings in the skin. Free nerve endings are exactly what they sound like. They don't have anything covering them up. They're completely naked, but they kind of are quickest to respond to something. They can respond to painful stimuli. They can respond to temperature changes. They can respond to itching. They can respond to joint movement and proprioception. Proprioception is just a very fancy way of saying body position. So don't let the word freak you out. When I think of proprioception, I think of my legs being under a table and me not being able to see them and somebody moving them around. It's not like I go, oh my God, I don't know where my legs went. I know exactly where my legs are. If they straighten them out or if they bent them or if they crossed my ankles, I'm going to know what that is because just by the sensations that I'm getting from my body, I know where things have been moved to. So we've got those. We've got Merkel discs. Merkel discs are going to be to detect light touch and superficial pressure. So we talked about the Merkel cells in chapter 5 being a part of our epidermis. I talked about like having a hair on your skin and being like something is touching me. Very, very light superficial pressure and touch. Nothing too pressure like, I don't know. Anyway, if you look at the bottom of this hair, you'll notice that there are nerve endings wrapped around the base. This is actually called a hair follicle receptor. So when something goes across and bends the hair on your arms or your legs, you have a tendency to feel it. Now, if you take your hand and do this, don't actually touch, just kind of graze across, you will actually feel your hair start going ticka, 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 because you're actually bending them as you go across. And as you do that, this hair follicle receptor can actually cause you to have that sensation. It sends the signal that something is bending your hair. A lot of times we notice it when a bug is crawling on us because they don't tend to crawl on our skin. They'll kind of crawl over our skin by using our hairs. And when they bend those hairs, the signal gets sent and we go, huh. At least I do because I don't like bugs. Now, Meissner's corpuscles. Notice that they are actually embedded in the papillae of the dermis. Meissner's corpuscles are involved in two-point discrimination. So what does that mean? When something is touching us in two places, Meissner's corpuscles let us know something is touching us in two places. But this is the catch. In order for you to actually know something is touching you in two places, you need to have two Meissner's corpuscles going off and sending signal. So depending on how dense they are under the surface of the skin, you'll be able to tell relatively closely when something is touching you in two places. One of the places that we have the most concentrated amount of Meissner's corpuscles would be on the palms of our hands. Why? Because we touch everything with them. So being able to actually feel and get extra sensation from our hands is really important. So you could probably get within a centimeter and somebody will still tell you, you're touching me in two places. However, let's talk about our back. Our back, we don't do anything with our back. We don't pick up pens with it. We don't open books with it. We don't type on computers with our back. So being able to have that two-point discrimination isn't really that important. So in our back, those Meissner's corpuscles are fairly far apart. You could probably get within an inch and somebody would say, you're touching me in one place instead of two places just because we don't have the density of receptors back here that we do on our hands. So those are the Meissner's corpuscles. Down here, we have the Ruffini end organs. The Ruffini end organs detect continuous touch or pressure, depression or stretch of the skin. The best way that I can think to describe this is your clothing. You know when you're wearing clothing. It's not like somebody could take it off and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I just noticed that my shirt is gone. No, you know that continuous touch all day long. Women, we all know that feeling of taking this little contraption off, don't we? And we all, at the end of the day, yes? Well, that's because that pressure being put on our skin is continuous. It lasts all day. And the minute it goes away, we know that it's a different sensation. Same with your clothing or your pants or your socks or your shoes. Again, this is continuous touch. This touches you all day long. So actually having this on you all day long and that sensation going to your brain, I have something on, I have something on, there's something touching my skin all day, that continuous nature of it is going to be the Ruffini end organ saying, hey, something's touching you, something's touching you, something's touching you, just so you know, okay? Now, finally, way down here, notice how deep this is. This is a Pacinian corpuscle. Pacinian corpuscles detect deep cutaneous pressure, vibration, and proprioception. Again, proprioception, very fancy way of saying body position. So when I say deep pressure, if you'll notice how deep this is, I mean, this is practically in the hypodermis, way the heck down here, right? This is way down here. And on top of that, it's also covered. So that little nerve ending is embedded inside of this like onion-like covering that you can see. Okay? So imagine for me that I take my hand and I cover it up in an ace bandage. So I've got this huge amount of ace bandage in there. How am I actually going to be able to feel anything on my hand? Because if you just pat out here on this ace bandage, nothing is going to happen, right? You're going to actually have to push really, really hard to get that ace bandage to distort enough to actually touch my hand, to make it feel different. Same kind of thing. With these receptors, you're talking about putting pressure. You're talking about pushing down, not only to get the layers of the onion to compress and cause that nerve to actually fire, but to get enough of the skin that again is sitting on top of this to compress down so that it fires and you actually get the sensation. That's one of the reasons why it's a deep pressure receptor, because even if you look at its location, it's way deep down in the skin. So looking at the model, here's the Pacinian corpuscle. That Pacinian corpuscle, again, looks like a nerve ending embedded in layers of an onion, right? So this is way deep down here. Again, it is going to be something that is a deep pressure receptor. As well, if you look up here, you'll notice that I've got the Meissner's corpuscles and I've got some free nerve endings. Nothing is covering them up. Let's go a little closer. So here are the Meissner's corpuscles. Remember, that's 2-point discrimination. Here is one of those free nerve endings. You can't even see that. Let's go like that. Here is that free nerve ending. Nothing is covering it up. Nothing is preventing it from reacting to a sensation. Okay, so we've got nerve endings in that model, whether they are going to be the Pacinian corpuscle or they're going to be the Meissner's corpuscle or the free nerve ending. But I do want you to know all of them, okay, because I can take a figure out of your book, I can take a figure out of this PowerPoint that I can put on your practical that you have to identify things. Okay, the glands of your skin. We have two major types of glands to our skin. We've got oil glands. I don't understand why this headband is not holding my hair back. Sorry. We've got sweat glands and we've got oil glands. These are the two major types of glands we have. In the sweat gland category, though, we've got two different types. So let's talk about those real quick. We're going to start by talking about the oil glands. So if you look here, see this little grape bundle looking thing? This is a sebaceous gland. Now, The oil gland, which is what this is, secretes something called sebum. Sebum is the fancy way of saying oil. So sebaceous is referring to the sebum that these create. Now, we have oil glands for a really specific reason. Our hair. I'd say 95% of our oil glands are going to be associated with the hair follicle. They're going to be associated with hair because they are our natural conditioner for our hair, okay? So if you look, there's a duct here, ooh, fancy word, duct, tube, that connects these cells that are secreting that oil to the hair follicle, okay? To where the hair is. So again, it's kind of our natural conditioner. It's our natural moisturizer for our hair. This sebum that is created is put in with the hair. Why? Our hair is dead. Anybody that ever has an ad that says, bring your hair back to life, they are lying to you because your hair has long been dead. Your hair dies still within your scalp. So anything that's out here, already dead. If not, getting your hair cut would be a whole new experience, okay? So we've got these sebaceous glands. They do look like grape bundles. They are always right next to a hair. You kind of can't miss them. Now, the other two glands that we have are actually going to be the sweat glands. Now, the sweat glands are not called sebaceous glands. They are called sediferous glands. Okay, that's a D. They're called sediferous glands. Sediferous glands, we kind of have two different types. Now remember we talked about the fact that we've got two types of hairy skin. We've got kind of the scalp hair and then we've got the places where we get hair after puberty. These are going to be the two different types of sediferous glands. So this is one, okay? This one right here is called an Apocrine sweat gland. Notice, Apocrine starts with an E, right? They are found everywhere. Okay, so Apocrine are found everywhere. Apocrine sweat glands are the sweat glands that our body uses to cool our body down when we're hot. These are the ones that sweat when we're hot, and you know, they produce sweat to help us to cool our body down. And again, they're everywhere. They're in the palms of our hands, they're on our arms, they're on our chest, they're on our back, they're on our legs, they're on our face, they're in our scalp, they're everywhere. Now, why do I make that distinction? That is the wrong computer. Because if you look here, see this, the white? Notice that it's in the scalp, it's in the armpit, it's in the thick skin. Sediferous glands are tubular glands, so they look like a test tube, only longer. So it looks like somebody took a water hose, held on to one end, and then just let the other end bundle and drop at the bottom. So when you look at these, you've got that kind of bundled tubing at the bottom, and then this duct tube at the top, right? So the deep coiled region, that region that's the bundle, is the one that actually makes the sweat. And then the tube or the duct, that tube that's going up toward the top, that actually, don't spray expo and then breathe in. Oh my gosh, I'm dying. Okay. That tube just carries the product up. As those cells at the bottom are making and making and making, eventually it works its way up to the surface. So we've got the Apocrine sweat glands, and again, they are everywhere. Now, remember I told you I would get into why an armpit was an armpit, right? Wrong computer. All right. This is our other sweat gland. This is called an apocrine sweat gland. Notice it's got an A. So for me personally, when I think apocrine, I think armpit, because this is one of the places that we get hair after puberty. So before puberty, we do not have active apocrine sweat glands anywhere. They're basically solid tubes that don't do anything. Once we hit puberty, they become active. They hollow out and they actually start making sweat. But they're only found in places that we get hair after puberty. For women, pubic area, armpits. For men, they get the hair on their face, the hair on their chest, hair on their legs. Their hair changes a lot more. In fact, I think it's like 95% of their hair turns into terminal hair after puberty. So they tend to have a lot more of these. It's one of the reasons why they kind of stink more when they're sweaty. These do sweat, or make sweat, but it's not enough sweat to actually work for cooling us down when we're overheated. The eccrine sweat glands do that very well. These don't. There's speculation as to what they are there for. One of the speculations is that it's a lot more odorous. It gives off a more odorous, product than the eccrine sweat glands. And of course, this is after puberty, so it may have something to do with pheromones and attracting a mate. But I'll be honest, guys, nobody has ever been able to prove the existence of human pheromones. So if you see a bottle of perfume that's an ounce and it's like $1,000 human pheromones, don't buy it, because yeah, they're lying. Anyway, so if you look again, that bundled region, that coiled region is down here. Then you've got the duct. But notice that this duct opens into this hair follicle, right? Most of them do, and they actually open right above where a sebaceous gland would be, but not all of them. So when you look at the model, let me erase that. When you look at the model, you'll notice another kind of bundle with a duct. This is an apocrine sweat gland. It is very different than the eccrine that are everywhere. You'll only find it in the one place where we get hair after puberty. So this is why this region is the armpit, because that's where you find that. So let's talk hair, okay? Hair is only found in the thin, hairy skin. Hair is kind of vestigial. It's something that we probably had when we were hairy like Chewbacca, but we don't have now. We don't have that concentration or density of hair that we used to have. If you've ever seen a cat get really mad, what's the first thing they do? Right? And they arch their back and their fur goes, right? Technically, it makes them look bigger. So it's intimidation. If you're freaking out, you look bigger so that you can scare whatever's near you. As well, if you've ever seen an animal when it's really, really cold, their fur tends to also. So having the density of hair that, let's say, a dog or a cat would have, looking like a Yeti or Bigfoot, it would make a lot of sense for your hair to kind of poof out and keep your body warm or make you look more intimidating and creepy, but we don't anymore. Hair doesn't really do that for us anymore. Now, one of the reasons that I mention this is because of this muscle that you can see right here, okay? This is a muscle called the erector pili muscle. Can you see that? No, you cannot. Dun-da-da. Let's try writing it down a little further. This muscle right here is the muscle that gives you goosebumps, okay? So that muscle takes your hair from an angle and pulls it so that it stands up straight. Again, yeah, that works real well if you're a cat or a dog or something that has really dense hair. For us, it still happens when we get scared. You get the kukui feeling and your hair on your neck stands up. And it still happens when we're cold. We get goosebumps when we're cold. But it's not as effective anymore. So looking at the hair in a very pretty picture, You'll notice that we still have the sebaceous gland. This part up here that is sticking out of the skin is called the hair shaft. Okay? Whereas the part that is under the skin, just like the part of a tree that's in the ground, is called the hair root. As we get to the base, you'll notice that it expands. This is called the hair bulb. Okay, so if you look down here, see this little area down here? This is the hair papilla. Remember the papillary layer with the fingers coming up in the dermis? Yeah. This is actually the dermis coming up into the base of the hair. You'll notice there's also this little capillary loop. This is where your hair grows from, okay? So you've got arteries, veins, adipose in the sub-Q layer, but you've got this dermal papillae or hair papillae coming out. Now, looking from here, you'll notice that there are actually cells here. This is the matrix. This is where your hair grows from, okay? You've got the dermal root sheath, which is this covering from the dermis, and then internally, you've got this internal epithelial root sheath that's kind of a mustard yellow, and then you've got this external epithelial root sheath, which looks exactly like the epidermis up here, same color and everything. And the reason that that is because it has the same layers that you'd expect to find up here. Now, there's that erector pili muscle. And when it comes to your hair, you've got kind of a core, a shell, and then an outer covering. The core is called the medulla. I've mentioned this before. Medulla always means the same thing. It always means middle. So this is the middle of your hair. You can see it in blue down here. Okay, it's the core. It's the bullseye in a bullseye. The cortex is outside of that. Again, medulla always means middle, cortex always means outside. So the cortex is going to be this purple that you see here. And then the cuticle. This is an outer layer of, well, one layer of cells that covers the outside. They kind of lay like shingles on a roof. If you've ever had a split end and you pull it and it goes all the way across, one of the reasons that happens is because you're pulling the cuticle off, and as you pull, it pulls all of the shingles as you go. So that's the cuticle of your hair. So looking at the base of the hair, again, here's the papillae. You've got that invasion of the dermis, and you've got that capillary loop. See this layer right here? This is where your cells from your hair start. You can actually see the green cells. Those are melanocytes that give color to your hair. Coming up is that matrix. Now, you get past here, and all of a sudden there are no more cells. Why? Their food supply is down here, guys. How far away do you get before you get away from that food supply and you start to die? Think of the stratum granulosum. So this is still within the scalp. Remember I said your hair's dead before it even leaves your scalp? This is why. You still have that blue medulla. You still have the purple cortex. You still have that cuticle layer. The internal epithelial root sheath, the mustard yellow, the external, and that dermal root sheath where the dermis is surrounding that hair. Taking basically a lifesaver's cut out of your hair. Middle, medulla. Outside of that, cortex. Outside of that, the cuticle. The mustard yellow is still that epithelial root sheath. Internal epithelial root sheath. The pink, peachy kind of color is still the external epithelial root sheath. And then out here is going to be that dermal root sheath, that kind of chocolate brown that you saw in the previous pictures. Okay. So looking at the model, we've got the erector pili muscle, number 2. We've got the sebaceous gland, that oil gland that's surrounding the hair. You can actually see it cut in half right here, and it's right next door, right? The eccrine sweat gland, remember, they're everywhere. So here, 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 here. Remember color coding. So in a model, if an eccrine sweat gland is white in one area, it'll be white in the other areas. The adipose is all this yellow tissue down here. The hair bulb, the hair root, the hair follicle is what's sticking out. The shaft, the whole thing is the follicle. The apocrine sweat gland is here. Mesner's corpuscles, those are these little things here. The free nerve endings, they're here. You can see the ends here. Let's see, Pacinian corpuscle down here, that deep pressure receptor. The dermal papillae exposed up here. The capillary loops. See these little loops of capillary here? These are the blood vessels that are feeding the epidermis, and you can actually see them kind of cut in half over here as well. And again, 5, 6, and 7 are going to be the hair follicle as a whole. Now let's talk nails, because nails are part of your integumentary system. So, looking at your nail, you've got the free edge of your nail. This is the part of your nail that sticks out over your finger. The nail body is the part that you can actually touch and feel here. This right here is called the nail groove. Think about it for a second. If you take your nail and you do this, you are not catching the end of your nail. And one of the reasons that you're not catching it is because it sits inside of this little fleshy groove, so that when you do this, you're hitting skin and you're not hitting nail. The nail fold is the actual fleshy portion, not just the groove. The lanula, this is that kind of half moon lighter portion up here. It's also the thickest part of your nail. You've got the cuticle, and then you've got the nail root back here, okay? So back under that cuticle. So lifesaver cut. There's that groove that I talked about. Your nail sits inside of that groove. So if you come at it from the side here, you're hitting skin and you're not hitting nail. That fold of skin is called the nail fold. Internally, you've got bone, of course. And then this is your epidermis. This is your skin. So this is cut this way. So you're looking at the inside this way, okay? Again, you've got bone, you've got the epidermis. Here's the nail body sitting in this area here, which is called the nail bed. There's the root under the skin, the cuticle. Back here is the nail matrix. This is where your nail grows from. This is the free edge. This is called the hyponechium. Everybody has probably done this, where you separate your nail from your finger and then you go and you get tea and you squeeze lemon, you're like, oh, it burns. That's because you've actually pulled this off of the base of your nail. Yeah. Now let's talk histology. Thin skin, thick skin. Epidermis from the scallops up, dermis from the scallops down. These little fingers here are going to be the dermal papillae. Notice, this is the epidermis here, right? About that big. That's the epidermis in thick skin, because here are my scallops and here's the top. There is a huge difference between thick skin, sole of the foot, versus thin skin, either scalp of the head or arm or whatever. Dermis is down here. You still have these dermal papillae. They're just really, really big in comparison. Now, something that's interesting, the pattern of the dermal papillae in your thick skin are actually responsible for giving you your fingerprints and your palm print. That pattern that you see there is actually what the dermal papillae look like under your skin. And they do tend to be really big peaks and valleys in thick skin. Now you might be going, okay, but why? What do we need them for? Grip. Imagine flipping through papers and you're having a hard time flipping through the papers. What's the first thing you do? Right? That actually gives you better grip because we have the twirls and the whirls on our fingers. When we're nervous or when we're scared, let's say running away from a predator, we actually sweat on our feet and our hands slightly, not like to the point that we've got like super wet hands, but we do sweat slightly and it gives us better grip. So if we have to climb a tree to get away from a predator, or we have to run and we need that extra grip on our feet, we have just a little bit of moisture so that we can actually do that. So looking at the layers of the epidermis, you've got the stratum corneum. See the purple? This is the stratum granulosum. Now, I'm going to bring you closer. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see. I don't know if you can see it, but do you see that kind of grainy look that it has? That's why we call it the granulosum, because it does look grainy. It does have that grainy look to it. Down here is going to be the spinosum, and then down here is going to be the basale, because it is the very bottom of that epidermis. Looking at thick skin, stratum corneum. See this gray line right here? That's going to be the lucidum. You've got the stratum granulosum in purple. You've got the spinosum. And then down here, the very base is going to be the basale. Now, zoom in. See the grains? They look speckly. That's the granulosum. This is the stratum lucidum. Again, it's so compact, it looks practically clear. The stratum corneum is up here. Notice that these cells have no nuclei. They're already dead. Remember what I said about the granulosum being that transitional layer where they go from being alive to being dead. So by the time that we get here to here, they're already gone. This is the spinosum. Now, using a microscope, I can't even get the basale into this close of a magnification because this is so thick, it won't fit inside of the viewing area that I'm looking at, inside of the, of course I can't remember the name, field of view. There we go. I can't even get it to fit in the field of view. So, looking at the dermal layers, again, we've got that papillary layer. We've got the reticular layer below it, papillary layer, reticular layer below that. Looking at a hair, there's the dermal papillae at the bottom, here's the bulb, and then the root of the hair. Notice this is still below the skin. You can see the adipose, you can see all of the gobbledygook on the side. Notice that this is really, really dark and all of a sudden it gets really light. This is dead. There is no living anything here. So when I say your hair is dead before it even leaves your scalp, this is what I mean. Here is an erector pili muscle. You can see that same smooth muscle organization that we see. Here's the hair that it's associated with. See this hair? See this bundle of grapes? This bundle of grapes? These are going to be sebaceous glands. Again, you can see bundle of grapes. These are all sebaceous glands, okay? Notice that it doesn't look like a hose. That automatically means sebaceous gland. It's an oil gland. If you look over here, though, see how it looks like tubing? You can actually see tubing here. This is going to be an eccrine sweat gland. Now, how do I know it's an eccrine sweat gland, not an apocrine sweat gland? Because of where the slide came from. It was scalp. And if it's scalp, there are not going to be any apocrine sweat glands there because we have hair on our scalp from birth. So going through puberty doesn't change anything that's there. This squiggly thing that you see is a Pacinian corpuscle, also in the skin. So that is the integumentary system. Yes, you need to know the figures. Yes, you need to know the model. Let me know if you liked this better. If you did, great. If you didn't, then I'll go back to it just being the PowerPoint without me in front of it.